We're going to learn a little bit more about data types and how we can find out what a data type is inside the interpreter using some commands. Anybody wants to stay on the train? Let me know. If you want to hop off, I bid you adieu. I hope you have a phenomenal weekend, and make sure you do the variable worksheet. It's pretty simple, but it's still 25 points, and I want everybody to get a good grade. Cool? All right, homies. It was great having you. If you're sticking around, let's do it. Okay, so we had brought up the terminology. It's at the top of the screen. Casting. Casting is forcing Python to say, I know you thought I was talking about a string or a number or something else, but you're wrong. I know best. I'm the programmer. So we can explicitly cast values based on what our preferences are. And we're going to go through that together, but first, we probably should know how to figure out what something is, what it's been assumed or implicitly assigned by Python. All right, so data types, casting are important when you know how to use them. So let's do a little code along here. We've got two burning questions. The first burning question is, how do we know what data type we're working with? The second burning question is, what was that function thing you were talking about and you glossed over really quickly like nobody knew what the heck was going on? We're going to get into both of those right now. Function very lightly, but knowing what data type we're working with definitively. Here we go. All right, get this out of my way. Okay, so functions. Functions are very unique, but functions are important to every modern programming language. I don't want to get into details, but we're going to use them right now, so I feel compelled to explain it a little better. Functions are, as the text says, named blocks of code. Just like you can take a value and name it a variable, we can do the exact same thing with entire blocks of code, multiple statements, multiple things that we want to do. And those blocks of code sit waiting, charged and ready to go, but only go when you give them the word, when you run them, or when they are called. We call it calling a function. Functions are also super unique because instead of variables being declared and assigned, functions can be written with logic inside them, with special instructions, and you can pass stuff into the function when you call it, and it can do that stuff in the background for you. The things that we pass into functions are data, but when we're using them in respect to a function, we call them parameters. I don't want you to feel you have to remember any of this right now. I just want to give you a very 40,000 foot overview like perspective. We're going to spend the whole the last 2/3 of this class is basically wrapped around functions. So you're going to get plenty of like exposure to this. Any named object with parentheses in front of it is a function. Python comes with tons of built-in functions to do specific tasks already. We've got some great examples that we've already played around with. For example, print. When we print hello world in quotes. When we, last week when we were looking at the ID of a variable, that ID and then the parentheses and we put the name of our variable inside there, that was a function. So you will see nothing but functions and you'll start to recognize how prevalent they are. So let's get a little example really quickly. When we say we want to print something to screen, what we're really doing is we're calling the print function and we're passing a string as a parameter. And that string, I always do air quotes because they're strings. That string is hello world. So whatever happens inside that function, inside that black box, that mechanism, it knows take whatever's given to me and then if I can, print it out to the screen. return that to the standard input. That's the whole sole purpose of the print function, is to take some parameter that the user or the programmer puts in there and dump it back to the screen. It's pretty simple, right? But that's its sole purpose for existence. And you'll see that the Python programming language is essentially made up of a ton of these very simple, singular-minded functions that are meant to do one specific task. But if you were to look at that function, even though it's just a line that you pass something into, there's a whole block of code that does operations in the background. The whole point of this is not to get on functions, but are we all tracking so far? Fairly simple. I mean, it's pretty heady. I shouldn't say it's simple, but fairly straightforward. Something that's predetermined, like a variable, many different operations and functions within it, and you can put something in there and it'll take it and do something with it. Okay. Okay. All right. A function that I want to look at right now is called the type function. The sole purpose of the type function is to take a variable that you've created and spit back to you exactly what type of data it is. That's its only reason for existence, is to do that one job. So I'd like you to pull up your command line. I'd like you to create a variable, assign it a value. It doesn't have to be John. I just throw that in there. You can pick a number. You can pick whatever, as long as you adhere to the rules of the data. Take the variable, assign it a value, and then use the type function, passing it your variable. Does that make sense? I'm using a lot of terminology, but I really want you to feel comfortable with it, because if you ask questions on forums or on Reddit or Stack Overflow, being able to use the right verbiage, the right terminology is going to get you a lot more mileage than if you don't. Okay, cool. All right, somebody feel free, please offer up. Tell me what you named your variable, what value you assigned to it, and then what happened when you passed it through the type function.
I just did the A name and then I put Daft Punk
Nice.
and then I typed in A name and it says class string.
Excellent. So let me see if I can duplicate that. Anybody do something other than a string? All right. So, like Christian was just saying, he created a variable, a name. He assigned it a value of Daft Punk. Let me double check. There we go. There's my variable. There's the value. Using the type function with parentheses. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my variable in there. All right, let's see what we get. Class string. Let's try this without.
I,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
yeah, I did. I named pi equals to 3.14, and then I got back that it was a float.
Excellent. All right. So here's something cool. We can take type, and we don't even have to use a variable. I can just use 12. Just put the number 12 in here. And it'll return predicates by telling us, if you gave this number to a variable, this is what I'd assume you were trying to give me. In this case, an int. Christian got a float. Other Christian got a string. So two things are going on here. One, we're starting to talk about functions, which is it's its own Oprah right there. But its only purpose is to be a tool to tell you what type of information it is. If you want to be able to figure out what data you're sending and how it's going to be interpreted by Python, the Python interpreter, you now have a tool to do that. And that tool is simply the type. I want you guys to remember that these functions that are built in, what they really are tools for your programming. So Print is a tool to print something to screen. ID is a tool to tell you what something's memory footprint looks like. Type is something to tell you this is data you entered, this is how I interpreted it.